welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Rahesha Sehgal. Kiev claimed on the 14th of January to have struck several targets deep inside Russia in its most massive attack of the Russia-Ukraine war so far. Reportedly, ammunition depots and chemical plants, some of which were hundreds of kilometers from the border, were hit across regions in the overnight attack, dealing a painful blow to Russia's ability to wage war. Well, the next day, Russian armed forces launched a group strike with high-precision weapons and attack drones on critical gas and energy infrastructure facilities that supported the Ukrainian military-industrial complex. Throughout the nearly three-year war on its neighbor, Russia has targeted Ukraine's energy resources in the winter months. And despite Ukrainian strikes on Russia, Russian forces have been gaining ground more quickly than at any other time since the country's full-scale invasion in February 2022. Our next report explores.
A massive attack was launched by Ukraine early Tuesday, in which multiple targets were hit in Russia's Kazan as well as in Engels, Saratov, Bryansk and Tula. Reportedly, the Ukrainian strikes had targeted weapon production plants, oil refineries and warehouses. Subsequent to the attack, flight restrictions were imposed at airports in Kazan, Saratov, Penza, Ulyanovsk and Nizhnekamsk. In response to Kyiv's largest ever aerial attack on Tuesday, Moscow's military launched missiles and drones targeting critical Ukrainian energy infrastructure, a recurring theme in the nearly three-year-long conflict. The Russian air barrage prompted the Ukraine's national grid operator, Ukrenergo, to introduce emergency power cuts in 6 regions. As Donald Trump returns to the White House, Ukraine is attempting a desperate pushback against Russian military advances on the ground. After nearly 3 years of full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia holds almost 1/5 of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. It has claimed to have annexed 5 of its regions, beginning with Crimea in 2014, and the Donetsk, Kherson, Lugansk and Zaporizhzhia regions in 2022. Russian President Vladimir Putin has demanded as a precondition to any peace talks that Ukraine withdraw from all these regions where its forces still hold significant territory. And on Tuesday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov welcomed Trump's tone on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Everything that has been discussed over the last year has several aspects to consider. First of all, the very fact that people are starting to talk more about the realities on the ground. It probably deserves to be welcomed. We will wait for concrete initiatives. President Putin has said many times that he is ready to meet, but so far, there have been no such proposals. Then President Trump said, Putin wants to meet, and I think we should meet. But first, we have to get into the office.
In Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's corner stood British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who on his first trip to Ukraine since becoming Prime Minister in July last year, pledged on Thursday to work with Ukraine and allies to offer Kyiv robust security guarantees in case a ceasefire is negotiated with Russia.
We must look at how this war could end, the practical ways to get a just and lasting peace. We agree that it must be a peace that guarantees your security, your independence, and your right to choose your own future. We will work with you and with all of our allies on steps that would be robust enough to guarantee Ukraine's security, guarantee any possible peace, and deter any future aggression. That conversation will continue in the months ahead.
Zelensky was effusive in his praise for Britain, which has been a vocal supporter of Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February 2022, and expressed confidence in the 100-year partnership deal as well as support of Ukraine's European partners.
We have signed an agreement about a 100-year partnership. We are confident in the independence of our state, and this is something Ukrainians will never give away. We are confident in our European partners, and this is something that strengthens Ukraine, Britain, and the whole Euro-Atlantic space.
On the front lines, however, Ukraine is on the back foot, suffering from manpower shortages and losing ground in the eastern Donetsk region as Russian troops continue their advance. Compounding the problem for Ukraine is the change of tone from Washington, which has asked Ukraine to address its shortage of troops. The big question is, can Donald Trump deliver on his promise of ending the Russia-Ukraine war? And what price will Ukraine ultimately end up paying?
After more than 15 months of war, Israel and the Palestinian group Hamas agreed to a ceasefire and hostage release deal on the 15th of January, following intensified efforts from mediators, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, Israel's main supporter. While Hamas announced its acceptance, Tel Aviv adopted a cautious approach, saying some final details still remain. In the meantime, Israeli strikes continued unabated in Gaza, killing more than 100 Palestinians. On Friday, Israeli Security Cabinet approved the deal, likely to take effect on the eve of Donald Trump's inauguration as US President on the 20th of January. The ceasefire agreement, which was later greenlit by the full cabinet, would halt fighting and bombardment in Gaza's deadliest war ever. But the question being, will the painful memories of the war go away? Our next report explores.
Qatar, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the United States are happy to announce the success of joint mediation efforts in order to reach a deal between the parties in conflict in the Gaza territory to exchange prisoners and hostages, and a return to a prolonged truce that achieves a permanent ceasefire between the two sides. In addition to an agreement for the delivery of large amounts of humanitarian relief and aid to the Palestinian brothers in the Gaza Strip.
This announcement by the Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Al Thani would lead to cries of joy, albeit tempered with grief, both on the streets of Gaza as well as Israel. Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who holds a largely ceremonial role, said the deal was the right move to bring back hostages seized during the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack that sparked the war. That unprecedented, audacious cross-border attack launched by Palestinian militant group Hamas is the deadliest in Israeli history, which resulted in the deaths of 1,210 people, most of whom were civilians. 251 others were taken hostage, 94 of whom are still held captive by Hamas in Gaza. This includes 34 dead hostages, and that's according to the Israeli military. What followed in the form of disproportionate Israeli response was beyond the worst nightmare of pre-war population of 2.3 million Gazans. Since that fateful day in October 2023, Israel's retaliatory campaign in Gaza has killed more than 46,700 people, most of them civilians, including women and children. And that's according to Gazan Health Ministry figures. Nearly all of its 2.3 million people have been displaced at least once in aid-starved Gaza. The coastal enclave now resembles a wasteland of rubble, with hundreds of thousands braving the harsh winter cold in tents and makeshift shelters. Such has been the devastation due to the relentless Israeli strikes that queuing for hours for a plate full of food became almost a satisfying experience. The news of a ceasefire agreement after months of fruitless negotiations hopefully will bring to an end the horrors of Palestinians living in perpetual fear of Israeli strikes. But this most welcome joy is not without a hint of sadness in memory of the lost ones. Some families were wiped out entirely, whereas some lost dozens of members. A scar from which they will probably never recover from.
I'm happy that the bloodshed, terror and fear for our children and all the Palestinian people who were under the threat of death and under the fire of the Israeli occupation planes, whether from the air, land or sea, will stop. I feel sad because I lost more than 200 members from my family, relatives, friends and neighbors.
According to the agreement, an initial 42-day ceasefire will see 33 Israeli hostages released, including civilian women, female soldiers, children, the elderly, sick, and wounded civilians. No sooner did the news of the agreement spread, demonstrators in Tel Aviv calling for the release of the hostages welcomed it and called for an end to the war.
I have mixed feelings. I feel joy mixed with terrible anxiety that it will actually happen. I'm calling to stop this war. So many of our soldiers are being killed. It is unnecessary death and we truly can't breathe anymore. It is an unbearable pain. Our soldiers are being killed and so are our hostages as a result of the military pressure. We only receive their bodies back. And also the innocent Palestinian civilians who are being killed. So it's everything all together. This war must end.
In addition to the release of the hostages, in the first phase, Israeli forces would withdraw from Gaza's densely populated areas and allow displaced Palestinians to return to their residences. 737 Palestinian prisoners, some of them serving sentences of 15 years and more, will be freed as part of the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. According to the Israeli Justice Ministry, a surge in humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza is expected, with hundreds of lorries to be allowed in each day, as well as the rehabilitation of hospitals, clinics and bakeries. Negotiations for a second phase would commence on the truce's 16th day, likely to bring a permanent end to the war. Stage 2 would see the release of the remaining living Israeli hostages, including men, in return for more Palestinian prisoners, barring those convicted of murder. There would also be a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza as part of the deal. The third and final stage involves reconstruction of Gaza, a mammoth task likely to take years, and the return of any of the remaining bodies of the hostages. After 15 long, arduous months of a devastating war, people on both sides, casualties of the war, are fervently praying that there are no violations of the ceasefire.
On the 11th of January, Sudanese armed forces claimed to have recaptured the strategic city of Wad Madani from the paramilitary rapid support forces. The recapture is a major blow to the notorious paramilitary group, which has been accused by the US of committing genocide in the ongoing Sudan civil war. Wad Madani, the capital of the Al Jazeera state and the nearest city to the Sudanese capital Khartoum, had been a key stronghold for the powerful paramilitary rapid support forces since December 2023. And it also served as a base for operations into neighboring states. Analysts are of the opinion that the recapture of Wad Madani by Sudanese army holds significant strategic value. Our next report explores.
Africa's third largest country by size, the Republic of Sudan, has been ravaged by war for more than 21 months now. Long simmering tensions between the Sudanese armed forces under the country's de facto leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the paramilitary rapid support forces led by al-Burhan's former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo erupted into an all-out war in mid-April 2023. The trigger was the planned integration of the paramilitary RSF into the regular army, an internationally backed political transition plan. The RSF quickly took over most of the capital Khartoum and rapidly spread into at least half the country, though the military has regained control of some neighborhoods in Omdurman and Bahri in recent months. Wad Madani was seized by RSF in December 2023, resulting in the displacement of hundreds of thousands who had taken refuge after fleeing from Khartoum in the north. More than a year after Wad Madani fell to RSF, Sudanese military claimed a major victory, saying that its forces entered the capital of Al Jazeera state early Saturday. The road and the bridge leading to the city of Wad Madani was strewn with bodies of RSF soldiers. The takeover was swift following weeks of advances by the army in the surrounding villages. Reportedly, the army was bolstered in recent months with fresh armaments and new recruits to allied forces. Addressing the troops and civilians in Wad Madani after the takeover, the deputy leader of the armed forces was a picture of confidence, boasting that bigger victories will soon follow.
If we are happy with this victory that took place in Madani, we say that there's still a lot in front of us. This is a big victory that we thank God for. But we are not stopping, we are going swiftly, we are in a hurry, and God willing, soon every inch of this country will be cleansed from the traitors, their terrorist militias, our treacherous Sudanese brothers, and all the countries and organizations that support these traitors. We tell them that Sudan is strong with its people, Sudan is strong with its military.
If the army manages to regain full control of the Al Jazeera state, it would be pivotal in its attempts to choke RSF supply lines to the capital Khartoum, most of which is still controlled by the RSF. Residents of Wad Madani, which was once a safe haven for displaced families in the early months of the war, expressed their happiness at the takeover.
We are very happy with the arrival of the army. It has brought us joy and happiness. We thank you very much because you have restored joy in us. You have brought back security and you brought back peace of mind.
The 21-month-long Sudan civil war has killed more than 28,000 people, forced more than 12 million to flee their homes, and unleashed the world's biggest hunger crisis. Countless others have faced unspeakable atrocities, including rape and sexual assault. Will the takeover of Wad Madani be a possible turning point in the devastating Sudan civil war, considering RSF still reigns over most of the central agricultural state of Al Jazeera, as well as nearly all of Sudan's western Darfur region and swathes of the country's south? It wouldn't be an easy task for the Sudanese army, which controls the north and the east, in addition to parts of Khartoum. A country which has experienced only brief democratic interludes has been ravaged by the latest conflict. And the worst part, it's been relegated to the unenviable status of a forgotten war.
The Bolivian capital, La Paz, was rocked by anti-government demonstrations on the 13th of January. Clashes erupted between the riot police and the supporters of former Bolivian President Evo Morales. That's when they attempted to break through police cordons stationed 2 blocks from the main square, which is home to the president's offices. Morales' supporters, said to be in thousands, were demonstrating against economic hardships and demanding the resignation of incumbent leader Luis Arce. The demonstrations came a day before a scheduled court hearing against Morales, whose arrest has been sought by the prosecutors in connection to his sexual abuse investigation. Morales' supporters, however, have labelled the accusation as a political persecution against the former president, fabricated to prevent him from running in the August presidential elections. Our next report explores.
Less than 7 months before Bolivia's general elections, a new showdown between former President Evo Morales and the incumbent President Luis Arce is threatening to spiral out of control. On Monday, thousands of Evo Morales' supporters arrived in the capital La Paz after a grueling 4-day march of 100 kilometers from the village of Patasamaya, south of La Paz. They were waving the national flag and colorful indigenous banner known as Wiphala and holding up placards with messages for the president, Luis Arce.
Queremos justicia.
We want justice for our unjustly detained people, and there should be a solution for the problem of the prices of the basic food basket. Otherwise, we are going to intensify our pressure measures.
Nuestras medidas de presión.
They clashed with riot police when they were blocked from entering the central plaza, which houses the government palace. In a bid to disperse the protest, police responded with tear gas and rubber bullets, injuring several protesters.
We don't want to be murdered. We placed Brother Arce in power. What does he want? We are not animals and we are not lambs. No.
He remains entrenched in the Tropic of Cochabamba, supported by his followers, pressuring for the acceptance of his candidacy for the August elections. Bolivian government minister Eduardo del Castillo attributed the demonstrations to a hearing scheduled for Tuesday concerning a probe into Morales over allegations of rape, trafficking and people smuggling.
It's a protest to defend pedophilia. All the people of Bolivia knows that tomorrow in the Tarija department a hearing of precautionary measures will be held to determine the legal situation of the former president Mr. Evo Morales. It is no coincidence that today a group of people from the Tropic of Cochabamba region arrived with the sole intention of generating upheaval within the national territory.
Morales has denied the charges of statutory rape and has likened them to a political witch hunt brought by the government of ally-turned-rival Arce to rule him out of politics. The Central South American nation is also in the grips of rising inflation, which reached 9.9 last year, the highest in 16 years, facing economic challenges and political divisions ahead of its August presidential election. Bolivia is witnessing a critical period in its recent history, one that may well decide its future for a long time.
Well, that's all that we could pack in this edition of World at War. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.